Rancher bought a 12-year-old girl from child labor. Then, what happens next will shock you. Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from, if you enjoy stories like this, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow, we have another special story for you. A girl was tied up to an old fence post behind a bar. Her arms were above her head like a scarecrow. She had no shoes on, and mud was all over her feet. Her dress was torn and stuck to her like wet paper. The rope around her hands made red marks because it was so rough. She was about 12 years old, maybe younger. She was very skinny, and didn't make any noise. Nobody knew her name, and nobody asked. People around her were laughing and playing games. Most people weren't trying to buy her. They just wanted to play cards inside the bar or drink whiskey. But when a child was tied up where everyone could see her, some men got curious. Some got mad. And the worst kind of men got interested. One man was leaning against a broken fence, chewing on dried meat and looking through the dust. "She's the card player's kid," he said. "Her dad owes money to every man in town. He's using her to pay back what he can't pay at the card table." He didn't sound surprised. Nobody did. Then the wind changed, and through the dust came a man on a horse. He was tall in his saddle, wearing an old hat and a worn coat. His eyes didn't blink too much. His name was Jesse James. He was 40 years old. He had no sons or daughters. He had a ranch that was falling apart, and he worked so hard every morning that it almost broke him. Jesse wasn't going to town that day. He was just taking old tools to get them fixed and maybe buying some things he needed. But when he rode past the alley and saw her skinny face and her arms shaking from holding them up, his horse stopped before he even told it to. He stayed there for a moment, his jaw tight, holding the horse's rope loose, watching and listening. A loud voice cut through the air. $12 for the girl. 1 week of work, or you can keep her forever. Your choice. She's small, but she doesn't eat much. The girl didn't lift her head. The card player was thin and smelled bad, and was missing some teeth. He walked over to the post and pulled on the rope like she was an animal. "She can clean, and wash, and cook a little. She's stronger than she looks, and she's too dumb to talk back." Nobody moved. The crowd walked away because they didn't want to watch. It was too ugly even for this town. Then Jesse got off his horse. He didn't look at the card player and didn't speak. He just reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a cloth with coins in it. The coins made noise when they hit each other. Card player looked at him carefully. $15, Jesse said. He nodded once. "You want her for the week?" the card player asked. "No, permanent," Jesse said. Then he stopped. "I'm not buying her. I'm just paying off your debt." The card player laughed. "Same thing," he said. He threw the rope into the dirt like it was nothing. "She's yours." Jesse didn't talk again. He walked over, got down on one knee, and cut the girl free with his pocket knife. Her arms fell down too fast. She almost fell over, and he caught her. Not roughly, but not gently either. She looked up at him, surprised, then quickly looked away. No tears, just wide empty eyes that had stopped hoping for kindness. A long time ago, they rode out of town, under a sky that was turning gray. She didn't sit behind him on the horse. He let her ride the mule alone. The rope from the mule was tied loosely to his horse. She held onto the saddle really tight with white knuckles, and kept her face turned away from the road. Dust lifted behind them like ghosts that weren't done whispering yet. Jesse James Ranch was 10 miles west. It sat between two rocky hills and was surrounded by trees that had no leaves because it was winter. The barn was half broken from the last storm. The roof was still leaking from the storm before that. Chickens walked around everywhere. A fence post was crooked near the front gate. Jesse hadn't had time to fix it. The girl looked at everything without saying a word. He led her into the main house. It was small and didn't have much in it. A pot of beans was cooking on the stove. It was the only warm thing in the room. A wool blanket was folded on a small bed beside the fireplace. He pointed to it. "Yours," he said. She stood there like she was frozen. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. Once, he scooped out beans into a dented tin bowl and set it on the table. She sat down but didn't touch the spoon. She just stared at it like she didn't know what it was for. "You don't have to eat it fast," he said more quietly. She picked up the spoon, being careful not to spill. When she tasted it, something in her face changed. Not because it was hot, but because of how it tasted. He realized then that she didn't know what it meant to eat warm food while sitting down. She didn't finish eating. She just said thank you in a voice that sounded like it came from under the floor. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell stories. He just lit a lamp, checked the fire, and said, I don't lock doors. You're safe here. She nodded again but didn't move. He stepped outside to take care of the mule. Night came fast, and the wind came sharp through the canyon. Coyotes cried somewhere past the hill. Jesse looked up at the stars, wondering what the heck he just brought into his life. When he came back inside, she was asleep. She was curled up on the small bed with her arms wrapped tight around herself, like she was still tied to something. At midnight, a floorboard made a creaking sound. Jesse sat up in his chair and put his hand on the rifle beside him. The girl was standing there with glassy eyes. Don't lock me in the barn, she whispered. He put the rifle down. I won't. I've been locked up before, she said. I figured. Silence. She walked back to her bed and curled up again. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. He didn't either. In the morning, frost covered the window. The sun came up red-orange behind the hill, making long shadows across the kitchen floor. Jesse poured water into the kettle. His hand shook just a little. He told himself it was because of the cold outside. A hawk flew in circles. Inside, the girl was still on the bed with her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Jesse James didn't know her story. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough men do worse things for less reason. All he knew was that the first thing she asked of him wasn't food or a name. It was not to be locked away. And maybe that was enough for now. She woke up with the sun, even though Jesse hadn't told her when to get up. No bell, no shouting. Just the natural way of a girl who was used to getting punished if she didn't guess right. The blanket had slipped halfway off during the night, but she hadn't moved. She lay still with her eyes open and her breath quiet, like she wasn't sure if the warmth was real. Jesse was already outside, splitting wood by the shed. His coat hung from one shoulder, and every hit of the axe echoed through the canyon like a warning to the cold. The girl stood at the door of the porch, not sure if she should ask permission or just step forward. She didn't do either. When he noticed her, he just jerked his chin toward the chicken coop. Chickens need feeding. Corn's in the sack. She went, without saying a word. She was barefoot, and her toes disappeared in the grass that was covered with frost. By the time he finished stacking wood, she'd come back. Her hands were red from the cold, and bits of straw were sticking to her skirt. He half expected her to complain. She didn't say anything. She just sat on the steps with her knees pulled to her chest, watching the road like she was waiting for someone to come take her back. They didn't talk until breakfast. Jesse had a habit of baking once a week, though his bread came out hard as a roof tile most days. This time, it was still warm with a golden crust. The smell filled the tiny house like something special. He put a piece on her plate next to a spoonful of honey and watched, pretending he wasn't watching. She didn't move. You can eat it, he said. She looked at him. All of it, he said. He paused. Of course. That's what it's there for. Her hands moved over the bread like it might disappear if she touched it wrong. She tore a piece off slowly, held it to her lips, then stopped. Should I save some for later? He leaned back, letting his chair creak under his weight. There'll be more later. She stared at him, not quite believing. He didn't push. He just got up, poured himself coffee, and looked out the window, as if the land might answer the hurt he couldn't name. After breakfast, she swept the floor 3 times, even though it didn't need it. She scrubbed the stove's black iron belly until it shined like a mirror. She folded her blanket twice, then again before evening. Jesse tried to tell her she didn't have to, but every time he opened his mouth, her eyes got wide like she was getting ready for a belt that never came. She doesn't know what to do with warm bread, he said to himself that night, or silence. Over the next week, they got into a routine. Not comfort, just routine. She followed him when he checked the fence line and kept up as best she could. When she tripped over a loose stone and hurt her knee, she gritted her teeth and kept walking. He stopped, handed her a cloth, and said, "It's not shameful to hurt." She only nodded, wiping blood in silence. On the 4th evening, he found her outside by the barn, curled up under a wheelbarrow. She wasn't sleeping, just hiding. When he asked what she was doing, she whispered, "Just checking." For what? If the door locked from the outside. He got down beside her, his voice low. "It doesn't. Nothing here does." She didn't answer, but the next night she slept closer to the fire. A week passed, then another. The neighbors started talking. "Who's the girl?" asked Hank Sutter, stopping at the well with his horse. Jesse answered with a look. "None of your business." Sutter raised an eyebrow. "Not saying it is. Just strange, is all." "Strange doesn't mean wrong," Jesse said. Then he walked away. By the 3rd week, she'd started humming. Barely. Only when she thought he wasn't near. A little tune that was off-key but steady, like a bird just learning its voice. Jessie pretended not to notice. She didn't ask about his wife. The grave behind the barn had no marker, only a stone with edges worn smooth by weather. One morning, the girl left a flower there, a single dandelion, crushed and dry from the season, but placed gently. Later, he asked, "You miss someone?" She didn't answer, but that night she whispered, "I had a brother." Had she didn't say more. Spring was trying to come in. The snow was gone from the hill, and birds had come back. Their calls echoed through the trees. One morning she found a robin's egg that had cracked open in the grass. She picked it up and brought it inside, holding the blue shell like it was made of glass. Jessie watched her from the porch and thought, she's been broken too, but she still holds things gently. The first time she laughed was by accident. Jessie had burned the cornbread black as coal. He said under his breath, "That loaf died for nothing." She tried to keep a straight face, but a snort escaped before she could stop it. Then she froze and put her hand over her mouth. Jessie didn't laugh back, but he smiled. "About time," he said. "Thought maybe you'd forgotten how." She ducked her head, still grinning behind her hand. They had only one visitor that month. The salesman who'd once played cards with Jessie in better days. He noticed the girl right away. "Hired help?" he asked. "No," Jessie said simply. The man grunted. "Not your family either." Jessie turned to her. "Go on inside, would you?" She obeyed. When the man looked back, Jessie's voice was like iron. "You don't ask about her again. She's not your business." Exactly. That night, she sat at the table longer than usual. Finally, she asked, "Will you sell me back?" Jessie blinked. "What? Men buy girls, then sell them again. That's how it works." He set his coffee down. "That's not what happened." She tilted her head. "Then what was it?" He searched for words, took his time finding them. "I think I saw someone drowning, and maybe I was too. So I pulled you out. And you," he paused, "you pulled me too." She didn't answer, but she didn't ask again. On the 12th night, she handed him a folded paper. "What's this?" he asked. "My name. You already told me, but not the real one." He unfolded the paper. 4 letters, shaky and small, but written like a promise. Lena. Jessie didn't say anything for a long time. He just nodded. "All right then, Lena." She smiled like she'd just been given permission to exist. The next morning, Lena brought in kindling, poured coffee, and set 2 plates without being told. When Jessie sat down, he found a slice of warm bread on his plate. Not from him, from her. She watched him take the first bite. He chewed slowly, looked up, and raised an eyebrow. "Little dry." She grinned. "You didn't complain about mine," he laughed. For the first time since his wife died. Outside, the wind carried bird songs through the hills. Inside, the fire burned steady, and for the first time in years, Jesse James didn't eat breakfast alone. Not in his belly, and not in his heart. The wind turned mean the morning they came. Jesse knew something was wrong before the dust even rose on the road. Birds went quiet. The air got that tight, waiting feel, like the land itself was holding its breath. He was chopping wood, when the dog growled low and steady with its ears flat. Jesse stood straight, wiped his hands on his pants, and looked east. 3 men riding slow. The kind of slow that meant they didn't need to hurry, because they expected everyone else to wait. Lena was inside washing beans. She hadn't seen them yet. Jesse didn't call her. The men got off their horses before reaching the gate. The first wore a preacher's collar, stiff and clean despite the ride. His eyes held no kindness. The second was a lawman with a crooked badge and a mustache trimmed to neat. And the third, well, Jesse didn't need a name for him. The eyes were enough. Sharp, cold, and narrow. He had the gambler's smirk and the same jawline too. "Morning, Jesse," said the first man, his voice even. The preacher stepped forward. "Mr. Boone, that's right. I'm Reverend Hatch. This here's Deputy Slater, and that man's Mr. Caleb Dawes." Jesse nodded once. "Slow. What brings you out?" Caleb Dawes spat in the dirt. "My brother sold you something he had no right to." Jesse didn't blink. "He sold me a debt. Girl was chained to a post behind the saloon. I gave him coin to cut her free." Deputy Slater cleared his throat. "That coin didn't make anything right legally. She's property, settled through a bet. There's paperwork." "She's not a mule," Jesse said. "She's a child." Reverend Hatch folded his hands like he was praying, but his words came sharp. "We're not here to argue about right and wrong. You're keeping stolen property under your roof. Unless you can show proof that you're her guardian, the child will be returned." Jesse felt something dark flicker behind his ribs. Not anger, not yet. Just a cold certainty that these men had come with their minds made up. She's safer here than anywhere else. She eats, sleeps, isn't chained, isn't afraid. That doesn't make it legal, the deputy said. Lena had stepped onto the porch without a sound. Her hair was braided, sleeves rolled up, apron smudged with flour. She looked small in the doorway, but she held herself like stone. Caleb's eyes landed on her and curled into a smile that made Jesse's stomach turn. Lena, the preacher said smoothly. Come here now, we'll take you home. This man's done his part. She didn't move. Girl, Caleb growled. You belong to our family. You were promised. Jesse stepped between them. She's not going. Deputy Slater's hand twitched near his hip. You sure you want to make this official, Boone? You really want to be on record as fighting the law? Jessie glanced back at Lena. Her eyes weren't scared now. They were hard. Said she didn't need saving anymore. You got 7 days, Jessie said. Come back with papers, or don't come back at all. Reverend Hatch's jaw tightened. The Lord doesn't like stubbornness when facing justice. Jessie didn't answer. The 3 men got on their horses again. Dust swallowed them as fast as it brought them, but the tension didn't leave with their horses. Lena spoke first. They'll come back, won't they? Yes. Then we got 7 days. She turned and walked back inside, like she'd just added it to her list between feeding the chickens and sweeping the porch. That night, Jesse couldn't sleep. He sat in the rocking chair near the fire, watching the flames jump like nervous hearts. He thought of his wife, her gentleness, the quiet way she had healed things, with tea and silence. Lena was nothing like her, and maybe that's what made this feel like something new, not a replacement. A reckoning. Lena stayed up to, reading from an old hymn book, mouthing the words but not singing them. At one point, she whispered, if they come back and take me, what'll you do? He didn't look at her. He just said, depends how loud you scream. The week passed too fast. Jesse sent a letter to a lawyer in Junction Bluff, an old army friend who'd once owed him a favor. But law moved slow out here, slower than horses. He knew better than to hope for papers before the deadline. On the 4th day, he taught Lena how to hold the rifle. Not to shoot nobody, he said, but to feel the weight, to know you're not helpless. She nodded and held it like a newborn calf, not fearfully, carefully. On the 5th day, they rebuilt part of the fence together. Her hands got blisters. She didn't complain. On the 6th day, she asked to sleep outside, just for one night, so she'd know what to do if she had to run again. Jessie laid out a blanket beside her under the stars. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The 7th morning came pale and windless. The kind of calm that only showed up before something broke. A wagon creaked up the road just after sunrise. Not the law, not the preacher. It was a woman with skin darkened by sun, eyes sunken, voice rough as gravel. She stepped down slow, leaning on a carved cane. When she saw Lena, she dropped the cane. Mama, Lena whispered, her voice barely more than breath. Jessie froze. The woman was no older than 30, but she looked 60 from grief. She fell to her knees before Lena and held her so tight the girl gasped. I thought you were dead, the woman cried. I told them I'd come back. I told them not to hurt you. They sold me, Lena said softly. I know. Her mother choked. I came back, but they told me you'd gone. They lied. Jessie stepped away, not sure where he belonged in this moment. But Lena turned to him. This is my mama. He nodded. I figured. Her mother stood on shaky legs. I got a shack near Cotton Bend. Nothing much, but it's ours. I came to bring her home. Jessie studied her ragged dress, thin shoes, bruised arms. She looked like a ghost trying to remember how to live. Lena looked up at him, waiting. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Lena walked to her mother, took her hand, then turned to Jessie. Will you come with us? He blinked. Just for a little. Help us get the place safe. His throat felt tight. That's your home. She stepped forward, closed her small hand around his. Weathered one. It's yours too, she said. The wagon rolled out by noon. 3 souls, 1 second chance. And somewhere on the trail behind them, the preacher's words scattered in the dust and meant nothing. But the sound of a girl calling a man family for the first time, that would echo across the plains forever, traveled slow, not because the mule was tired, but because trust takes time, and no one wanted to scare it. The road to Cotton Bend wound through scrubland, where the trees grew twisted and low, clinging to red dirt like they'd survived storms that tried to pull them clean out. Lena rode in the back of the wagon with a blanket. around her shoulders, and her mother asleep beside her, head tilted, mouth open from being so tired. Jesse walked beside the mule, hand on the ropes, boots dragging slightly in the dust. He hadn't meant to go this far, but when Lena asked, he couldn't say no. He never really could, not since that night she whispered, "Don't lock me in the barn." The shack appeared near sunset, a slanted roof building leaning against a rock ridge, walls patched with tin and wood that had seen too many winters. Smoke from a tiny chimney curled upward, lazy and blue. A bent windmill creaked nearby, and the smell of pine sap hung thick in the air. "That it?" Jesse asked. Lena nodded, but her mother, Mara, stared ahead like she just remembered every bruise she ever took inside those walls. They reached the door. It groaned open with a shelf. Inside, it was better than Jesse expected. Swept, dry, with a small table and one bed. A few jars lined the shelf. He saw a child's drawing tacked to the wall with a rusty nail. A woman, a girl, and what looked like a red house. The red had bled out with time, like a memory stretched too thin. "She kept this," Lena whispered. Her mother smiled weakly. "It was the only thing I could carry for a while." Jesse helped start the fire, gathered dry wood, lit it with his flint, and fed it gently until it crackled. He didn't speak much. He knew when to give people silence, and this house was full of it. That night, Lena cooked beans and flatbread. Her mother dozed, waking only to say that the bread smelled like home. Jesse slept outside. In the morning, the wind shifted again. He smelled smoke, not cooking smoke, wildfire. He jumped up and saw the ridge to the west, glowing faintly orange, like an ember flickering before it remembers its flame. He ran to the shack. Lena was already outside, barefoot, staring at the horizon. "It's moving," she said. Jesse looked at the trees. Wind's pulling it east. "If it jumps the canyon, it'll be on us before dark." Mara stumbled out behind them, coughing. "What do? "We run," Jesse said. But Lena didn't move. She was staring at the tiny shed beside the shack. "Mama's things are in there. My books, her papers." Jesse glanced at the sky. "Not worth your life." Lena looked at her mother. "What if we don't get back?" Mara's face crumpled. "Jesse made the choice for them. I'll get it. You get the mule ready." Lena opened her mouth to argue, but he was already moving. The shed was locked with a bent nail. Jesse ripped it off with his knife and shoved the door open. Inside, a trunk, some old linens, a wrapped bundle of dried herbs. He grabbed what he could, stuffed them into his coat, and ran back as the first ash drifted down. By afternoon, the fire had reached the top of the ridge. Trees screamed as they burned. Smoke wrapped a valley like a closing fist. They rode out just in time. Behind them, the ridge burned red, angry, alive, eating everything. Mara cried. Lena didn't. She watched it burn and said quietly, "It took everything again." Jesse looked at her. "Not everything." They rode until they reached a creek, where the water still ran clear and cold. They camped there, made coffee from the last of the grounds, and said little. That night, Lena sat beside Jesse, their backs against a rock still warm from the day. "I thought if we came here, maybe something would heal," she said. "It did," he answered. She turned. "How can you say that? The fire took it all." "Fire burns what's dead," Jesse said. "But it doesn't kill what's already living." Lena blinked slowly, like she was taking that in word by word. "I kept thinking this place would fix things," she whispered, "that I'd see Mama in her home and something would feel right. But all I saw was what we lost." He nodded. "That doesn't mean it's not worth remembering," he said. "But you don't have to live in it." She didn't answer, but when he stood to walk back toward the fire, she followed without hesitation. In the morning, they went back to what was left of the shack. The walls were blackened, one side caved in. But something caught Lena's eye near the tree stump out front. A book, slightly burned but still whole. She picked it up and dusted it off. Inside was her drawing, untouched. She held it to her chest and smiled for the first time in days. "Guess fire didn't win everything," she said. "No," Jesse said. "Not even close." As they packed the mule again, Mara leaned on Jesse's arm a little longer than needed. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "No, but I'm glad I did." She studied him. "You ever think about making something permanent again?" He didn't answer right away, but Lena looked between them, quiet, hopeful, the way only someone who'd known loss could be. Jesse placed the book in the saddlebag. "Let's get home first," he said. "Then we'll see what still wants to grow." They turned toward the road. Behind them, the ridge still smoldered, but ahead, the wind smelled like rain. By The time they made it back to the ranch, the fence was gone. Jesse stared at the smoking post. Charred wood still hissed beneath the ash, like the ground itself was crying. The wind carried a bitter scent of oil, burnt rope, and anger. This wasn't wildfire. It was human, measured, meant. Lena stepped down from the mule slow. Her mother held the saddle, shaking from the road, eyes wide with a fear she couldn't voice. But Lena, 12 years old, feet blistered, heart stitched from scraps, just stood there, not afraid, not surprised. Jesse walked around the edge in silence, boot prints everywhere. At least 3 men. He could tell by how deep the prints were, that one of them limped. Caleb Dawes. They had waited, watched, and when no one was home, they'd made their move. Inside the house, the furniture was turned over. Jesse's wife's rocking chair had been chopped apart with a hatchet. The rifle was gone, his ledger too, and written on the door with charcoal was one word: thief. Mara covered her mouth, but Lena stepped forward, fingers touching the black letters. They want us scared, she said. That's all this is. Jesse looked at her, really looked. There was something in her now, something forged in the red glow of the ridge, something that wouldn't be broken again. The girl who once whispered, "Don't lock me in the barn," was gone. What stood in her place was steel. "We're not running again," she said. Jesse nodded. "No, we're not." They started fixing things by first clearing the mess. Mara put the chairs back up and swept glass into a bucket. Lena untied what was left of the hay bundles and spread them to dry. Jesse rebuilt the front step. By sunset, each nail was driven down with purpose. That night, they slept in shifts. Jesse kept the shotgun across his lap. Mara leaned against the wall with a blade tucked in her sleeve. Lena didn't sleep. She just sat near the fire, watching the door like it might breathe. At dawn, someone knocked. Not heavy, just steady. Jesse answered with the shotgun raised. On the porch stood Hank Sutter. He didn't flinch. "Word's gotten around," Hank said. "Some men think you took what wasn't yours. Some others think you saved her life. I know which. I'd bet on." Jesse lowered the gun. "I brought nails," Hank added, holding up a sack, "and planks. We're going to need a few more hands if we're fixing that fence." Behind him, 3 more neighbors waited. One held wire. Another had stew. Mara stepped forward, unsure. Hank tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Lena stayed on the porch, arms folded, watching. Always watching. By noon, a dozen people were working. Someone brought fresh water from the well. Someone else offered blankets. No one asked questions. They just built. Caleb Dawes rode in near sundown. He didn't come with a badge or preacher, just himself and the sour grin that had once made girls flinch. "Looks like you got a party," he said, getting off his horse slow. Jesse didn't reach for the shotgun this time. He walked toward him steady. Caleb spat. "You think this changes anything? She's still marked. Property. You got no papers." "She's not property," Jesse said. "She's a child." Caleb laughed. "You going to marry her mama? Make it legal that way. You really want a burned-out widow and a wild brat for your trouble." Lena stepped down from the porch. She didn't speak. She slapped Caleb across the face so hard, the sound echoed through the hills. The men stopped working. No one spoke. Caleb's cheek burned red. "You don't get to talk about my mother," Lena said, voice quiet but deadly clear. "And I don't belong to you." Caleb sneered. "Little wildcat thinks she's grown." Jesse stepped beside her. "She's not wild. She's brave. That's more than I can say for a man who only shows up when the fire's out." Caleb's hand moved near his belt, but too many men stood behind Jesse now. Too many eyes watching. He didn't draw. He got on his horse. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," Jesse said. "I won't." Caleb turned and rode off without looking back. When he was gone, Lena turned to Jesse, chest rising and falling fast. Her hands still shook. "I was scared," she said. "I know, but you didn't run." "No," he said. "You didn't." That night, they ate together by the fire. The stew was warm, the bread soft, and when Mara sang a lullaby from some long-ago memory, Lena rested her head on her shoulder without flinching. Jesse watched them. Something deep in his chest relaxed for the first time in years. He let himself lean back in the chair and close his eyes just for a minute, without fearing what might come in the dark. Later, as the fire burned low, Lena looked up at him. "Do you think I'm still broken?" He didn't answer right away. He walked to the old cabinet, pulled out his wife's carving knife, and handed it to her. "It's not about being broken," he said. "It's about what you do after." She took it gently, the blade shining in the firelight. And then she smiled. Not because she was fixed, but because she wasn't hiding anymore. In time, people forgot how she got there. They remembered her bread, her stories, her stubbornness. And when she rode into town years later, with her own wagon, with her own name on the ledger, no one called her Wild. They called her Boone. Because names are earned, and fire only changes everything if something new is waiting in the ash. This story, well, it's not just about rescue. It's about what comes after. And if you're lucky, like Jesse James was, the person you save might just save you.